Next up is iPadOS. 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 This is a folio cover. So thankfully, iPadOS 17 still runs on my 2018 iPad Pro, so I got to put the beta on here myself, and while my expectations were certainly low, Apple found a way to tick me off, and I didn't think that was going to be entirely possible, but I guess the reason I'm ticked off is I was just kind of assuming Apple wouldn't do anything that I wanted or asked for. After most of you guys, anytime I suggested a single good idea for the iPad, I met with a million comments that say, Drew, it's an iPad, it's not supposed to do that thing, until Apple adds that thing, and then you're like, oh my god, that's such a great idea. So yeah, most of iPadOS is definitely just playing catch-up, which is why I've seen people refer to it as hand-me-down OS, because pretty much all we wait around for every year with iPadOS is, are you gonna get the things that my iPhone already has, or are you gonna get the things that the Mac already has? It's just like the iPhone is on one mountain, and the Mac is on another beautiful, huge mountain, and then there's just this runoff features that come into the middle where iPadOS is, and it's like, oh, maybe we'll get that this year. Oh, no, maybe next year. The biggest noticeable change from the get-go is the customization of the lock screen. Definitely a lot more customization than there was before, and the UI is very similar to that of the iPhone, but I guess the reason I have a hard time getting excited about features like that, or, you know, adding things like the health app to the iPad, is this was just so dang predictable. Like, if you go back and watch our recap video from Dub last year, we all were literally saying that, yes, all of these lock screen customizations on the iPhone should be on iPadOS, but they're not, so we're gonna have to wait till next year, just like how we had to wait for home screen widgets an entire following year, you know? And when Apple originally separated iOS from iPadOS, we all got so excited thinking, oh, that means Apple's gonna give the iPad a bit more of a unique identity. It's gonna be separate from the iPhone and the Mac now. It's in its own category, when in reality, separating the two actually has just given Apple the excuse of not having feature parity between the two. Instead of enhancing the iPad, it lets them push down the iPad and say, we can come up with some cool new iOS 17 features, and yeah, it'd be kind of hard to bring that to the iPad this year, so let's not do that. We'll just add it next year. So pretty much it becomes incredibly predictable to know exactly what Apple has in mind for the following year. For iPadOS 18, we'll probably get something like standby mode, which is really cool, and I enjoy it on the iPhone, but the iPad, which is a much bigger display and is often charging and is already in those folio covers or Magic Keyboard cases that people have, it would be a great device to have as a little digital alarm clock, especially for people who have the smaller iPads like the minis, but they didn't have time for that this year, so we'll probably get it next year. But the real thing that ticked me off, you know, I was already like not expecting much in the first place. I really just charged up my iPad from dead just to try out iPadOS 17, was that Apple like pretended to listen. Years ago, you'll find videos on my channel of me explaining why I think it would be so useful for the iPad to have an external webcam and just let you plug in third-party cameras and access them, particularly if you'd like to do live streaming like I do. It's really, really useful, especially with continuity camera, which is also not on the iPad, even though Apple decided we could add continuity camera to the $200 Apple TV, actually less than $200. Yeah, we can let your iPhone become a webcam for that. We can even let your iPad become a camera for the Apple TV. But no, can you attach a continuity camera to this thing? I guess not. You're just supposed to use the onboard cameras. But the reason it offended me, per se, is because I was asking for it, and that was the one thing I was kind of giving Apple credit for yesterday. I was like, oh, okay, they're adding external webcams. I asked for that. I'm not going to excuse all of iPadOS. I'm not going to act like that one feature is going to solve anything, but it's kind of nice and I want to try it out. So that's why I charged it up from dead. I got my old Cam Link to plug into my Blackmagic camera to see if I could get it to interface with the iPad, and it did for FaceTime. And because it's FaceTime, they still want it to be a mirrored image, but what drove me nuts is the fact that it literally only works via FaceTime. You can't access the external webcam through the camera app. You can't access it through third-party apps. You can't access it through anything else. I was in settings, playing around as much as I could, and even through FaceTime, if you access the external webcam, then it doesn't really give you an option to switch around. There's no like switch to onboard camera after the fact. So if you were FaceTiming somebody with the external webcam, but then you wanted to switch to one of these lenses, there's no UI to do that. And I really, really want Apple to prove me wrong on this one, because knowing how lazy they get and how basic iPadOS will stay throughout the entire development beta process, I'm pretty confident that this is the intended delivery. Like, some people are thinking, oh, in a future beta update, they'll probably fully unlock it and give you more controls over which camera you're accessing and let the external webcam work through the third-party apps or the basic first-party camera app at least. I really, really want Apple to prove me wrong on this one, but because Apple has been so lazy with iPadOS, still not giving it a calculator app, especially when they gave us interactive widgets, which they should have been from the beginning. They were actually interactive before the big iOS 15 redesign and everything. That would have been a perfect time for the calculator app to become a widget right on the home screen that you could interact with. They didn't even want to fuss around with that? No? And optimized battery charging is literally on everything else. It's on AirPods, it's on the Apple Watch, it's on the iPhone. It's probably freaking on Apple Vision Pro already. I bet that battery pack caps out at 80% when it's plugged in for too long. But they still can't even get around to that. That's why I have very little hope that there's going to be a future update where they let you actually access the external camera outside of FaceTime. And what's hilarious about the external webcam support to me is like, okay, if it's only useful for FaceTime, I guess the whole point of Apple adding it is so that if you're using your iPad with an external monitor, which very few people do, but if you do because you have the M1 chip or whatever, now you can access the webcam on the studio display and have it mounted from a higher position. Okay, that was embarrassing that it didn't have it in the first place, but yes, it technically now supports that. But what's funny is that they enable external webcam support on devices that don't really have actual external monitor support. Like the iPad mini supports external webcams, despite the fact that if you plug it into an external monitor, it's just going to do screen mirroring. So that's definitely not a product that I think can take advantage of it just if your mindset is, well, Drew, it's only for FaceTime, it's not really meant for anything else. Then why even give it to the lower end iPads in the first place? Like, I don't understand the logic or the Final Cut approaches with iPadOS 17, but the fact that they found a way to say like, yeah, okay, let's give people what they're asking for, but not really. Let's not try too hard with this and make it only work through FaceTime and give you basically no controls over what inputs you're pulling from. That seems very rushed, very last minute. I think all the software development went towards iOS 17, and of course Apple Vision Pro and Vision OS is probably taking up a lot of their time. But yeah, that just leaves iPadOS stranded in the dust. And I know you're gonna ask me to be patient and wait around, they'll fix it, but I'm sorry, a lot of people have spent over $1,000 on these devices. Now there's probably a whole new wave of people dropping $1,500 on these things because, oh, okay, I need to try Final Cut for iPad now, and they're waiting for really, really basic features. And I know you guys want Apple to come up with this grand vision of how we redesign iPadOS to do everything a Mac can do, but without macOS, and yet we have to wait around for the tiniest incremental updates every single year, where it's like, hey, can we get something simple like a calculator app or optimized battery charging, or at least the wallet app, something as basic as that, or the Apple Watch app so that I can pair my watch to my iPad if I want to. No, you just get the health app, and that's good enough for this year. Maybe next year we'll get the wallet app, and the year after that maybe we'll get optimized battery charging, and the year after that we'll get Calculator Plus, a $9.99 subscription that requires the M3 chip or better. When people have spent this kind of money on a device, I don't think they should have to wait this long for these kinds of features to eventually trickle down from them and have to put up with the excuse of, well, it takes time, we gotta optimize it, we gotta scale it and get it working properly. No, you don't! This hardware, like the M1 chip and M2 chip iPads, it's the exact same silicon that Apple's putting in their Mac lineup, which has had external webcam support literally since the Intel days. This is not a new thing. They've had it for years and years and years. Exact same silicon, the drivers exist, the software exists. This is just straight up laziness. Like, at this point, just giving up on iPadOS and porting over macOS literally would be faster than what we're putting up with year after year, where everybody can predict every single feature that they add because they're just borrowing it over from the Mac, or they're just borrowing it over from the iPhone, and they're like, oh yeah, we should probably include the iPad in this too. So my expectations were definitely low, but geez, they found a way to still tick me off and be like, yeah, let's kind of give them what they're asking for, but not really what they're asking for. That way, when they complain about it, we'll come across as petty, as there's probably A lot of people already commenting, oh, come on, Drew, you're being unreasonable. You wanted them to add external webcam support, and they did it. Yeah, but not like this. This isn't what I meant. This is just like when your mom asks you to take groceries out of the car, but then you just, like, leave it at the front door, and you're like, what? I took it out of the car. And she's like, I wanted you to put it in the refrigerator. macOS is the refrigerator. iPadOS is the groceries on the floor. Does that make sense for you? But other than that, I really liked it. So what do you guys like about iPadOS 17? You love those stickers? You like playing catch up every year with your $1,000 Pro Tools? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. This is your Alp Shape here, and I will see you all in the next one.